So I think there was something which was a technical reason for doing it, which was I'd just changed job. I'd moved from a kind of delivery focused job in local government, particularly local government finance, into public service reform, and that's a much broader policy area, involves many more stakeholders, perspectives, complexity. And I was curious about what u.lab and Theory U could bring to that understanding on my part.
Okay.
And secondly, I've spent most of my professional career working on targets and kind of programme and project management type delivery challenges. And I was very conscious that those have a place, and sometimes they were successful in delivering targets or outcomes in the short term. But my experience and observation of that was that it felt a little bit unfulfilling sometimes. You've probably heard of the expression, deliver the target but miss the point.
Yeah.
And sometimes it felt a bit like that, even in the celebration of delivering a target for the government. And secondly, I was aware that sometimes it's difficult to sustain the level of performance when it's purely driven from a very PPM and target delivery kind of behaviour and way of doing things. So I had a personal curiosity around satisfaction in myself about how I was, if you like, delivering change, and I had this new job which said I had to go and explore different ways of making change happen. So like most people, when confronted with a new way of doing things, a change, I spent a little bit of time in passive resistance. But I am drawn to improvement, so I was curious. But I did resist initially. And then I had the opportunity of participating in what's known as the Presencing Institute programme, the 3-day immersion course in Theory U. And that's what really brought me to Theory U and to a u.lab type experience. So in those 3 days, and I want you to imagine here someone who's a kind of professional manager, quite programme and project driven, and someone who wouldn't perhaps naturally take to some of the things that I was about to embark on. So I went onto this course with a very, I think I was reasonably open-minded, but I went with all of the baggage of who I am and what my experience is, and I was just aware that that would be a feature of what was going to happen over those couple of days. Initially, it was about making connections with other people who were there from very different backgrounds, surgeons from Gallagher in Spain, through to people working in academia in Belgium. Just a real broad variety. I think I was there with the Deputy Mayor of Livorno as well, so quite a broad spectrum of people from different countries, different backgrounds, wrestling with different kinds of changes that they were making to their systems of work or relationships or whatever. So firstly, just making those connections and opening yourself up to what you can get out of that kind of connection with other people away from the workplace. Yeah. Secondly, practicing deeper aspects of listening, which I think is really important, and I had been curious around dialogue technique in advance of my experience of the u.lab work. However, deepening my practice of that through walking and listening in a structured way, and practicing some mindfulness, just really preparing myself to be engaged, fully engaged and fully listening to people around me, and having the space away from the workplace to do that. So that was the first kind of my first day or so's experience, and again some time in the evening to reflect on all of that and how that had felt. The second day was much more challenging for me because it involved working in a group quite conceptually, doing what was described as modelling with materials. So I call it my Blue Peter Day, which was using, pipe cleaners and bits of sticky back plastic, but creating a version of reality as it appeared to a group of people from their multiple perspectives, and spending time to look at that from different perspectives and to listen deeply to other people's views and values about what the model was. And then from there, moving that through into some personal physical sculpting and modelling. Now look, I'm a man from the west of Scotland. We don't really do that kind of thing. However, I think opening myself up to that kind of just being open-mindedness of what the theory could help me with, open-heartedness to the people around me, just really soaking up the richness of all the different people who were there and experimenting with the techniques, did actually find me modelling some of the resistance to change and what it would take for me to be a part of a change in a way that I wouldn't have predicted I would have engaged with at the beginning of the course.
Yep.
And then on the third day, with the group I was working in, we began prototyping, we began experimenting with perhaps some things we could do on our return that would help us put into practice some of the changes that we had discussed and modelled. And we also gave each other some peer feedback in terms of little coaching circles where it was possible to bring some problems, some wicked issues, some stucks, and discuss that as a group. And maybe worth saying that on the day, the third day of the course, so the day in which the course was wrapping up, the vote for Brexit took place. So imagine being in a European setting on the night of the Brexit vote. So my stuck on the day after was how I would go back to Scotland and what the implications of Brexit would be, and listening to the perspective of others around some of the areas that I might want to focus on and be curious about. So that was my experience. Now, I had that experience at a point in between two jobs.
Right, okay.
So it was a really rich time to take a step back and do a bit of reflection, both about the nature of work, but also me. And it probably coincided with me for a transition point in life, not yet, but coming up to 50, and just a natural point of reflection around work and purpose and how I contribute to that. I've done two things there. One is I've spoken to other people who had been exposed to some of these techniques, if you like, call them that, probably more ways of being, I think, because I think you buy into more of a way of being in work and out of work as part of it. But I spoke to some other people who'd come back and implemented some of the techniques just to get a sense of how they had experienced that and what had worked for them and what they'd found more difficult. And from that, I then decided how I might introduce it into regular practice. So having taken over a new job, I used the opportunity of meeting some members of my new team and doing some dialogue walking with them as a way of listening quite deeply to some of the things that mattered to them, their background stories, and really to forge the way in which we would work together and cooperate going forward. So I used it quite quickly post the presencing course. The second thing I did was to introduce it into settings in which I was a part. So every year the Scottish Government has an annual seminar or workshop which it holds between the chief executives of Scotland's 32 local authorities and the executive team and location directors of the Scottish Government. So it's quite a high prestige event. The quality of that dialogue is really important. And I introduced to the programme, I suggested and it was accepted that part of the programme would be a dialogue walk between the executive team of the Scottish Government and the 32 chief executives of Scotland's local authorities. So around the centre of Glasgow, in August of this year, there was a dialogue walk. And it was a different experience for both parties to engage around, and the feedback was that it helped us shape the subsequent discussion around how we could work together more effectively, because we'd taken time to kind of listen to how it felt to be each other at that point in time and what our values were and where we were coming from to begin that richer conversation around how we could work together. And finally, I had my own team away day, my full team last week, and we did a couple of things at that meeting. We did some dialogue walking around Leith. So the residents of Leith must be getting quite used to people walking and talking.
They're out again.
And that was probably, other than my own personal experience of doing it on the course, perhaps the richest one that I've experienced. And secondly, we did a little bit of journaling. And we also did some journaling yesterday in the executive team strategy day of the Scottish Government.
Okay.
And that was both Kenneth Hogg and myself leading a process of journaling and reflection. So yeah, we have taken some of those tools and we have embedded them in our routine, if you like, ways of being in the organisation now. I think it's quite challenging sometimes to come at this from perhaps even a civil service point of view. We are used to, I think, I know I am used to, thinking before I write or commit. And the process of journaling, for example, requires just being and scrolling out those thoughts, those feelings which are deep, and doing it without thinking first. I think going through that 3-day experience that I had was really a real checkpoint for me at that point in time. So it was quite a profound experience. How has it manifested itself? I think people might find me a little less task focused, a bit more present, and a bit more engaged and listening to what's going on around me, and placing a value on a deeper level of listening and connection than otherwise I might have done beforehand. Now, I can't say that sometimes I don't revert to type, and on a really busy day I might look a bit transactional and a bit task focused, but it's no longer my pattern or habit. So there is a correction override which goes into place, which says remember the quality of the listening and the dialogue, and remember what it feels like when you make that deeper connection, and how you can really get traction on an issue when you really understand what the concern is, or the passion or the ambition of someone else. I would like to think that people would notice a difference. People around me, not in work, notice a difference. So that's probably a better test, given the the two cohorts of people we would be talking about. And I would also like to think that people who are not part of my team, but wider colleagues who work alongside me, would have noticed a difference in the quality of engagement. And it's not just about me listening to them, it's also me listening to me, about how I feel about particular situations or changes, and me respecting that in myself and understanding how I might be showing up in those situations. So I know I'm changed because I'm spending more time thinking about things that perhaps I would have felt was just intuitive or taken for granted, or wasn't as important as the issue I was trying to grapple with. And now I pay more time to how I am feeling. And that might manifest itself in not catching the bus down Leith Walk, but walking and using that time as a mindful time to check in with actually how I'm feeling about an issue, and how my feelings towards it might be making me more close-minded or close-hearted than I otherwise would be about an issue. So it's made me, I would say, or it's prompted me to be more reflectful of who I am and how I show up. Probably the other advantage, which I think, or the little thing that just keeps kind of acting as a little point of correction or for me, is I really value the importance that the process of VDU places on the system in which things operate. So obviously people can interpret that differently. There's a systemic approach down into the values and models and mental models of individuals. That's a systemic thing, but also in the broader sense of systems, and really looking at an issue and thinking of it within the context of the system that issue is part of, and going right to the edge of that system and placing a value on hearing voices right at the edge of that system, because some of the most interesting, less predictable responses come from the very edge of the system. So practically in pieces of work which I'm doing, I'm paying attention to make sure that we've got as many relevant parts of the system in that work with a voice as is possible.